Among all the prominent national teams, the Dutch one has a distinguishing feature. No other side that played in the World Cup decisive match at least once in the last 15 years didn't miss the final stage of the tournament so frequently during this period, 4 times. I obviously took Croatia out of equation as a relatively young country. As for Netherlands, this national team either is coming to the biggest football event as one of the protagonists or is simply skipping it. If you think about it, this anomaly could be logically explained. The Dutch signature playing style is based on nifty passing and dominant possession of the ball, the strengths which are required footballers of a really high level. If they are there, everything is fine. If not, the side is simply not worthy of its style, the trend we saw in the not so distant past. But this time, the class is certainly in place, even if the squad comprises Virgil van Dijk, Matthijs de Ligt, Frenkie de Jong and Memphis Depay, is certainly not as talented and impressive as the generations of Johan Cruyff or Marco van Basten. Anyway, there are reasons to believe that the Dutch are not only capable to walk off their status of one of the 7 or 8 major contenders, but could make a step or two forward and finally get the coveted prize which has eluded them for decades. Louis van Gaal, the ageless head coach of the national side, is the biggest of these reasons. One of the most controversial football figures ever, the ever irritable and vindictive man, Van Gaal is a genius and villain rolled into one. His taste to the combinational sublime football is second to none. His knowledge of the game is astonishing. Louis is a brilliant tactician and renowned talent spotter, but the truth is that with numerous assets, many times were overshadowed or even completely blocked by his poor relationship with the concrete team. It may look odd, but in the case of Van Gaal, the consequent success of a lure almost strictly depends on players and what their attitude will be, because Louis himself is always the same, firm, demanding, angry, and obnoxious man, even a tyrant at times, who likes to humiliate and intimidate those who are around him. He didn't change for 3 decades and won't change in the future. In order to accept his evocative coaching methods, obey and listen to him, a collective must be highly motivated. In other case, it will be a waste of time. Here lies the dividing line, and the golden Ajax of the mid-1990s, along with Bayern, that reached the Champions League final in sensational fashion in 2010, and the Dutch national team, which finished third at the World Cup in Brazil 8 years ago against all odds, formed one side of this tendency. Working at Ajax, Van Gaal wielded a considerable influence and power in the time when the free foreigners on the pitch rule was still in place, and therefore the borders were rather closed than opened. The young players that came from academy were forced to unquestioningly follow his orders, whatever unpleasant those one could have been. If a footballer wanted to develop a career and move to Italy or England in search of a bigger contract, he should have excelled at Ajax at first, and the only way to it was to be on good terms with the petulant Louis. On the other hand, Bayern, by the time of the Dutchman's arrival, were mired in crisis, and on top of that, didn't manage to reach even the Champions League semi-final for many seasons in a row. In this scenario, the footballers were involuntarily hoping that Van Gaal's superb tactical and pure football skills will lead them to the point many of them haven't reached before, and Louis definitely didn't disappoint them in this regard. As for the Dutch national team in 2014, it had been driven by strong motivation of different kind. For the likes of Arjen Robben, Robin van Persie and Wesley Sneijder, it was the last legitimate chance to perform at the World Cup, being in a truly competitive shape, and they simply clung to it and accepted Van Gaal's complicated personality as it is, being mindful of the fact that he is capable to propel them to a really good result. But there are plenty of examples of another kind. During his first stint at Barcelona, Luis struggled to inspire the players, especially the experienced ones, who caught the glorious Cruyff's era. Almost all of them weren't impressed at all by the coach's specific character and manners, and were even less inclined to follow his line. At the Camp Nou, Van Gaal at least won 2 La Liga titles, although his 2 Champions League abject campaigns are much more memorable. But the first period at the helm of the Dutch national team has been even more disastrous. In 2001, the side, which represented a collection of big names and huge masters, failed to qualify for the World Cup, leaving the pundits and spectators in an utter disbelief. Indeed, the Dutch have been the victim of tough draw in the form of Portugal and the Republic of Ireland, but this failure has been even more resulted from the internal discord. The core of the team was composed of the footballers that have been trained by Van Gaal at Ajax and Barca, and by that point almost all of them were absolutely fed up with his methods and could hardly perceive his commands. 10 years after that, the story partly repeated at Bayern, when the group of influential players, headed by Frank Ribéry, decided that one season with the ferocious Louis is more than enough. As for the current situation, it certainly belongs to the positive column, given that for the lion's share of the Dutch national team, this World Cup is not only first, but also the best opportunity to shine in this competition. For Van Dijk, who turned 31 this year, it could be the last chance as well, and for that reason he transformed from skeptic, who has been initially against Van Gaal's return to the national side, and we could hardly blame him for it, into his right-hand man. As for the younger players, they also understand that now it's their best shot, given that Netherlands today can boast the abundance of high-profile managers. Danny Blind and Frank de Boer, ironically enough to those players that have been able to withstand Luis's tough personality a record-long time, were simply not good enough in the role of national team's head coach. As for Ronald Koeman, who is severely limited both in terms of tactics and creativity, he is not much better either. So the fact that Van Gaal leaves his post right after the upcoming World Cup should give the footballers an extra motivation to succeed and sacrifice themselves in the sake of winning. It's significant that after the veterans' comeback, Netherlands remains unbeaten within 15 games, the number which not only bodes well for the future, especially if we recall that most of these matches were against pretty solid opponents, such as Denmark, Germany, Belgium, Wales and Poland, but also is a testament to the fact that the head coach and his team are working in a relative harmony and aiming for one goal, which is perhaps even more important, bearing in mind how crucial for Van Gaal's type of manager is a healthy contact with the squad. There is another circumstance that undoubtedly plays into Luis's advantage. The imminent World Cup promises to be the strangest ever, not only due to an unusual timing, but also courtesy to the fact that all the teams have very few days to prepare. Normally, head coaches have 3 or 4 weeks at their disposal in order to bring footballers in an appropriate physical shape and regain all the connections. But this time, nobody will get this kind of luxury. In the situation when every side will start basically from scratch, Van Gaal's unique knowledge and expertise could be vital, as well as his ability to improvise and find really smart tactical solutions amid the total uncertainty. This tournament, perhaps more than ever, will be the competition of coaches, and from that point of view, Netherlands could enjoy a huge initial edge. Will it be as huge as the ultimate prize? This is another question. Let's wait and see.